Was jerry-rig everything actually onto something with the new iPad Pros? Has Bendgate 2.0 officially been confirmed for the new 2018 iPad Pros? Is Apple now doomed because they are letting bent iPad Pros leave the factory? No, not really. I'm probably going to give in to the stereotype that so many people expected Tailosive tech to stand on, but once again, I don't think that this is completely as big an issue as people are making it out to be. So, without further ado, here is the Apple sheep defense rant for some of the reports saying that iPad Pros are coming bent out of the box. And hold off on the comments and disliking until the end of the video, okay? Because a lot of you may actually agree with me more than you realize. So first things first, I need to just clarify with everyone, Apple did an oopsie. They absolutely have made a mistake. There is a flaw in the manufacturing process, and I am not trying to deny that flaw, as many people are going to put it in my mouth. Drew denies that it's even an issue. It is an issue. My argument today is not that the Bendgate problems with the iPad Pro are not real, simply that they're not as massive as people are making them out to be. I recently reviewed the iPad Pro, and I had very nice things to say about it, and I still use this every single day, and I think it's a marvelous product. And I'm annoyed that there are people out there that are getting discouraged to buy it now because of very, very small design flaws, not even to mention the fact that it's incredibly difficult to notice these problems. Not saying that they're not problems. Can we acknowledge that? I absolutely think that Apple needs to fix this issue. Probably the dumbest thing about this whole situation is the fact that Apple made a statement yesterday confirming that during the manufacturing process for the new iPad Pros, part of the process involves cooling down the metal, the aluminum, and the plastic on the inside, and it can cause somewhat the metal on the iPad Pros to warp. And that can showcase a little bit of bending on the iPads, but, and this is where Apple put their emphasis, the bending is not significant enough for it to cause any type of functional problem with the iPad. You can still use every accessory, you can still use every product that is normally capable with the iPad Pros that may or may not be affected by the slight bendingness that is probably going to be more prominent on the cellular versions. And now my biggest mistake with Apple's claim is they're saying that they don't see this as a defect, it's supposed to be considered completely normal. Apple, if you don't think it's supposed to be a big problem and you don't think this is a design defect, don't bring it up. The fact remains now that because Apple brought up that some devices may be slightly bent, but not in any way that is harmful to the use of the device or prevents you from using any type of accessories or taking advantage of all of the opportunities the iPad Pro offers, you shouldn't have said anything, because now everyone is going to be looking at their iPads like this. Everyone's trying to see if their iPad is bent. They're going to be laying it flat on tables. They're going to be using measuring tools and rulers against their iPad Pros to see if they got any slight imperfection with their iPad Pro. But luckily, it's a good thing Apple said this now, because for the most part, anyone who bought one and out of the box noticed a problem, you can take it directly back to Apple, get it replaced, and make sure that your replacement doesn't have any bending problems. So this is absolutely a hardware problem. This is not something Apple can fix in a week with a software patch, as many Apple problems in the past have been situations like that. That's why I understand a lot of people are upset about this. The difference, though, is I don't think this functionally affects the use of the device. This is simply an aesthetic complaint. And on top of it being an aesthetic complaint, I think it's even more remotely harder to see, given in order for you to find out if your iPad Pro is slightly warped because of their flawed manufacturing process, you literally have to close one eye. It's very difficult to see if your iPad is bent with keeping both eyes open, because that's how insanely thin the iPad Pro is. And also, in all the user-reported pictures, and I've been browsing the web for a while, and I have to say it, they're not that common. Usually, if there's some type of flaw in the manufacturing process, we start noticing it very, very quickly. This Bendgate complaint, though, with the iPad Pro, has taken a full 2 months for users to actually start reporting, okay? When I unboxed my iPad Pro, it was November 7th. That's where anyone who pre-ordered one got theirs. That was like the international launch date for everyone, and this was not a widespread reported issue. People were using their products day after day. In fact, week after week, a whole month would go by, and this was not known as a common problem. This was not something a bunch of people were reporting on, and it really makes a lot of sense. You know why? Because you have to hold the iPad completely perpendicular to your head so that you can tell if this slight warp, if this slight bend is there, which, by the way, you can't use the iPad that way. You have to look at it to use it. And also, in all the pictures showcasing that they have a warped device, they have to take their cases, their smart covers, their keyboard cases off in order to measure that slight imperfection. So just so we're clear, I'm going to repeat this a lot because I know a ton of people aren't listening to me anyway. I'm not denying that there's a problem, and I absolutely think Apple saying that it's not a problem or it's not a design defect is stupid. They absolutely need to start investigating this, because when people spend as much money as they do on iPads, because they are expecting absolute perfection. And as soon as there's a way for them to see any type of design flaw that some iPads might have and some iPads might not have, people are going to get upset because they hold Apple products to a much higher standard. I agree with you there. Absolutely. They need to investigate this. They need to figure out how to cool the devices more adequately and make sure that they don't warp or bend during the manufacturing process. But do I retract my recommendation for the iPad Pro because of this issue? No. As far as I can tell, given the fact that iPad Pros have been available since November 7th for people to unbox and use on the day-to-day, and it's now taken till December 19th, December 18th for users to start sharing their complaints that, hey, wait a minute, I think the iPad Pro's bent a little bit. Means that this is not something inherently noticeable to the average consumer, and also, given the number of people that have photographic evidence of them being affected, it's not a huge percentage of the iPads. For those curious, yes, I checked my iPad Pro, I laid it flat on a table, screen down, which by the way, I never do. I took the smart cover off my iPad Pro, used it in ways that I never use it by holding it perfectly perpendicular to my face, closing one eye, and you know what? I discovered it isn't bent. It lays completely flat on the table. But once again, the only reason a ton of people are gonna find out that their iPad Pro is slightly bent is because they had to read an article about it. Someone had to point it out to them. In my opinion, that is not a serious design flaw. A serious design flaw is likely one that affects the functionality of the device. And because Apple said this is a process that happens in the manufacturing plants, that means that the iPad Pro has not been widespread reported for bending in people's backpacks, for bending because people sit on them, for bending because it was packaged in luggage. In regards to previous generation iPad Pros that have done that, this is no exception. iPad Pros for the past 5 years have been capable of bending if you put them in harsh enough conditions. And Apple said in their statement yesterday that the 2018 iPad Pro has not seen a drastic jump in returns compared to previous generation iPads, which means that all the people who bought the iPad Pro because they wanted to take advantage of its features, use the new specs, use this gorgeous display, no one's been checking this precisely enough or been able to notice that their iPad is bent enough for them to warrant a return. Luckily, most of the lifespan of the iPad Pro has taken place during the Apple holiday season, which means that if any of you have purchased an iPad Pro after November 14th, which again is only 1 week after the launch of the iPad Pro, you have up until January 8th to return this iPad, meaning that if you absolutely can't stand the fact that you find your iPad slightly bent a little bit, even though it doesn't affect the functionality of the device, but you're bothered by that, it annoys you, you can absolutely return it and get a 100% refund, and even a replacement, which you can unbox there in the Apple Store and make sure, okay, this one's not bent, I'm good to go. I really think it's important that we keep talking about this because I want Apple to know that their customers aren't okay with it. It's not okay to just send out iPads that are bent. It was quite bizarre to hear a statement like Apple say something like that. And while I'm sure that as more and more people get upset, Apple will start looking into the issue and make sure that the bending is not prolonged, for the foreseeable future, everyone is fine. You can still buy an iPad Pro and make sure yours isn't defective. And as we've seen in the numbers, and as we've seen as this product has been around for over 6 weeks now, it doesn't seem to be a super common issue. Not a ton of people are having this problem, and the people who are experiencing this problem, it's not affecting the uses of the product. You can still use it perfectly fine. And I bet there's a ton of people who got defective units that are slightly warped, but because they have to close one eye and hold it perpendicular to their face, they don't realize it. They don't even know that there's a problem. And in my book, that's the sign that it's not really a massive issue. To the people who want to point at me and call me a hypocrite because I brought up the scratch gate problems on the Pixel 3, keep in mind the scratches and the scuffs and the buildup of imperfections on the back of the Pixel 3, that was noticed within the first week the Pixel 3 was available. In MKBHD's review for the Pixel 3, it was incredibly noticeable on the back of the Pixel, and the matte finish that causes that scratching on the back of the Pixel 3 serves no functional purpose. It's literally there just because Google was like, we want it to look like a Pixel, so we want a matte finish and a glossy finish. Doesn't actually serve any physical benefits other than it looks cool, but it ages extremely poorly. In any Pixel 3 with that black colored design, if you didn't use a case on it, it was going to be a very noticeable design flaw, which you can see with both eyes open. I don't really compare that to being the same type of aesthetic issues that we have with the iPad Pro, because with this, you have to hold it and look at it a very specific way, which is funny, because in my opinion, if someone doesn't realize that their iPad Pro is bent, you have to then respond to them, you're holding it wrong. Now, how ironic is that? Now, also, if I hold it like this, I would be able to say, yeah, it looks flat to me. But then if you wanted to prove to me that my iPad Pro is bent, you would have to say, well, close one eye so that you can get the narrowest down of it and then hold it perfectly perpendicular. You don't use your iPad like this. It's not a serious issue. It's not a major issue that warrants any recalls or giant repair programs because it's incredibly difficult to notice. To the people that are bothered by it, absolutely you should get a 100% refund, and if that kind of thing bothers you, you probably would have noticed it within the first couple days, or at least the first week, given that the first week that this was available, you still had your 15-day return window. So you had plenty of time to notice if there was a flaw, and frankly, if you didn't notice that there was a hardware flaw, again, not caused over time. iPad Pros are not bending because people are being hard on them any more than they previously have been in the past. This is an issue that Apple is acknowledging happens in the manufacturing process that's right out of the box. So please stop panicking about it. Stop acting like this warrants a complete cancellation of the product's release and everyone needs to return them and it's a complete recall. It's not the same thing as major issues as we've seen in the past with smartphones and tablets. If you want the iPad Pro, I really encourage you to go out and get it. Don't let these articles dissuade you. And remember, I have nothing to gain from that. I don't work for Apple. Apple doesn't pay me, as much as that would be cool and would probably make sense. I'm just saying, I love my iPad Pro. I enjoy it. And if you think you're going to enjoy it too, you should honestly go check it out. Don't let these slight bending rumors destroy your chances of upgrading or destroy your ideas of upgrading, because the majority of people over the past 6 weeks have not been able to see it. To those who have it, you can replace it for free. And probably the dumbest part of this process is Apple just acknowledging the fact that this is a common problem. They should just address the issue and move on rather than saying, it's okay, some of them might be bent. Oopsie. Bad idea, Apple. Very, very bad idea. Hopefully they can learn from this. We'll find out over time. Now just keep in mind, people, if touch disease starts happening to the iPad Pros and the thinness of it starts affecting the functionality of the product, that's a different discussion, and I'll completely change my opinion of how Apple handles the situation if that starts happening. But as of right now, that has not been a widespread reported issue. Let me know what you guys think of Bendgate 2.0 on the iPad Pros down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.